what we've got then is we'll have a brief introduction. I think I'll tell you a bit about my school to begin with, only because that can set the context and set the scene. I'd briefly like to go over the DFE standard on teachers' professional development, which I think is really good and really important, but I don't think gets enough airing in our profession. And, you know, I talk to some people who know far more about pedagogy than I do and all the current trends and things, but they haven't quite heard of this standard, which I think is a shame. And then research-informed CPD and career development. How can we make career development based on research-informed practice part of the school? And then talk about staff collaboration and research-informed CPD, because I think that's a vital area. And then making research-informed CPD part of the school's pedagogical ethos. So all of our schools have ethoses, and I think it's good to have a kind of a pedagogical view on that. Previous schools I've been in would be building learning power and things like that. We've created our own way of dealing with this called the Reach Free Toolkit. So I'll explain a bit about that and how it relates to CPD, and people can make what they like of it, but it's been quite successful with our staff. Then developing inter-school research-informed CPD, which I think is very important, and then linking research-informed CPD into appraisal and performance management. And then we'll have more questions and answers if they're needed at the end. So essentially, I think I'm quite lucky in a way, because I work in a school that's very, very young. It's obviously a free school. It came through with that legislation in 2010. The school was founded in 2013. We're in our 7th year of operation this year. And one of the things that I've enjoyed doing over the years is I joined this school in its 4th year of operation. And because things have been so busy building it up and things, and I know some colleagues from another free school might be with us today, one of the issues there was that when I joined, CPD was almost like a blank canvas. And the head teacher said to me at the time, you know, come in with your ideas and come in with what you'd like to do. And of course, I spoke to a lot of staff, and I think what we've done with our CPD is create something from scratch that hasn't been, if you like, diluted by all the different things we've had coming through in previous years. So I think we're quite lucky there. And again, it builds into our school's vision as well. So we're a non-selective school. We're very small. We have a 4-form entry. Again, being a new school, we're a Google school. We're technology rich. All the kids have devices, and all the teachers do, etc. And on top of all that, though, we still have a traditional curriculum, and we do like to be a bit different, a bit quirky, if you like. So, like a lot of free schools, we started off in an office block. Our year 7 start off with their own room, which they stay in for most of the year, and their own form tutor. We've got a vertical house system with characters from To Kill a Mockingbird. We stay an hour longer on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so teachers can essentially teach what they like for an hour to add a bit of extracurricular. Community common room where we do community events. So that's the background to the school. And before we go into CPD, we do have these expectations of staff. So staff joining us throughout the years, because we've been quite a small staff, we've really been able to embed this. And we do believe in hard work, determination and confidence, which I'm sure all schools do. We also think it's very important to be innovative, using current ideas, etc., in order to develop this culture of high expectations. We also think that self-development, which is the point of this whole CPD presentation, is essential here. And linked to that, research, evidence and review. So building in research into our school, looking at the evidence for it and seeing if it works in our context. We like to work in teams, and essentially, like all of us, doing what's best for our pupils. But on top of all of it, having a bit of a common sense approach, because something that might be fabulous in another school might not work in our context, etc. So that's the school. And again, when I joined, I thought it was really important that we use the DFE standard on teachers' professional development. Now, I'm not sure if people have heard of this. It's a shame we don't have clickers, so we could have a kind of a show of hands on who do. But essentially, what the professional standard does, it was put together by David Weston, who's CEO of the Teacher Development Trust for the DFE, and it was released in 2016. And it looked at a lot of evidence on continuing professional development and best practice in schools and what works best in terms of impact over the long run. And David Weston, who's spoken to me a few times on this, went off and looked at particularly a lot of meta-analysis, spoke to a lot of academics, spoke to a lot of experts on this. And this is essentially what they came up with and was accepted by the Department for Education. So basically, we should develop on, focus our CPD on improving and evaluating pupil outcomes. So I'm sure we'd all agree with that. Any CPD we do with our staff must be to improve the life chances of the pupils we teach. But then also it should be underpinned by robust evidence and expertise. And for me, that's really, really important. So we're not just teaching what we think fits. We're not just going off and taking the ideas perhaps we were given as trainees or we've used in previous schools but might not be effective. We're looking at evidence that is out there and also looking at expertise, be that academic, be that in other schools, perhaps specialist leaders of education, etc., and building that into our CPD programs. Also, it should include collaboration and expert challenge, which again, I think is very, very important. Staff working together on CPD will often have a wider impact because we can see how it works in slightly different nuances across the school. Staff are very busy. I'm sure we're all busy, everyone I'm talking to now. So if you work across staffing bodies, you can work together on different things and put it all together. And of course, expert challenge, to challenging each other. So a lot of my ideas that I'll put forward to staff do go out for consultation. We do criticize each other on using that. And it's not necessarily the case that something that might be quite good generically would work in every single department. So we need to make sure when we put forward evidence, ideas that have been worked together in groups, that we still challenge the need for that across the school. And then professional development programs should be sustained over time. So in years gone by, people would have those nice days out, perhaps, which is still sometimes needed, but we'd all go up to London, go to a hotel, we'd meet someone perhaps who was an expert in something, have a lunch, and then go back and feed back to our departments. And often perhaps forget about what we were doing or something would change and things like that. So it's looking at a way around that. How do we make sure that any CPD we do lasts perhaps a term, 2 terms, a year? Of course, we know CPD will continue forever, but that would be key there. And then obviously it needs to be prioritized by school leadership. So school leadership need to give staff the resources for their CPD. They need to give them the time. But one of the key things would be leading by example as well, getting involved in CPD and being part of that process. So these are the key things there, and I'm not sure what people think of them though, because not every teacher I speak to thinks that they're perfect. So I've got 2 questions here, and I'm not sure if anyone would like to perhaps say anything at this point, or perhaps just put some things in the chat box. Why should we adopt them? Are these professional, the standard on teachers' professional development? Should we adopt them and should you adopt them in your own context? And do you think that there's anything missing? So I don't know if you'd like maybe a minute or so just to put some things in the chat box. And if anybody wants to say anything, please do so. I'm just going to give you that minute because I can't quite see the chat box or anything. And if anything is said, if Nicola, you could just say what they are.
Absolutely, Angie. Thank you. I think, well, yes, let's just pause a little bit to see if we get anything, and I'll let you know. Okay, so thanks to Charlotte Brewer, thinks it's important that CPD is timely and accessible for all, i.e. available when needed as opposed to waiting for a course, etc.
Okay, so and I guess that's a development thing as well. It's continuous on that one.
There's nothing else that's come in for the moment.
Okay, so again, if people want to say things as we go along, that would be fantastic.
Oh, sorry, Angie. Yes, we've got Annabelle Ashwell, who thinks that courses, with courses now being so expensive, it's really important that staff can cascade info down to the rest of the staff.
Yeah, and I think that is very much like with Charlotte talking about it being continuous, and that point about cascading it, and that will go into the collaboration. And perhaps a lot of people now use the idea of action research in school, and that's banded about a lot. But for me, the key to action research is that you don't stop. You do your research, and then someone else continues with it to see if it can be tweaked and adapted. And again, if you perhaps do some element of CPD yourself, it's important to, again, cascade that and feed that back and see how it works in different contexts. And one of the things I think is interesting at the moment, and I've got some people here that I think are very popular on kind of education circles on Twitter, etc., is the idea of research-informed CPD and career development. A university lecturer I do some work with recently sent back an email after I did a presentation for the university on retrieval practice, saying it's all very trendy at the moment. And one of the things with research-informed CPD is it seems to be very much concerned at the moment at looking at evidence and perhaps disputing things and debunking things from before. And I was just interested to see if anybody here, and they can speak up if they want to, knows any of these famous characters perhaps from the education world at the moment. Don't know if they want to put that in the chat box. Trying to make the presentation interactive. Nope. So again, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Tom Bennett, who's been advising the government on behaviour, founded Research Ed. We've got Crazy Christodoulou here, with David Didal, writer of a number of key books a lot of people are reading at the moment. Tom Sherrington, who I'm sure everyone's got a copy of his snapshot of Barack Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction. We've got Oliver, I'm going to try and pronounce his second name without reading it first, the guy who does all the drawings for Tom Sherrington and other things. These are the Bjorks, who are very big on interleaving and retrieval practice, the authors of Make It Stick. And over here, we've got Rosenshine's himself. And one of the key things here is that I think we're getting a lot of opportunities now for research-informed CPD, and there's a lot of things out there. So I'm sure people have been to Research Ed here, they've heard of Teacher Tap. There's organizations like CAMSTAR, which I'll come on to in a little while. So again, I thought we'd just stop here and think, what do we mean by research informed, and what opportunities are there for research informed development out there at the moment, be that in school or outside of school? And are traditional one-off training days now redundant? Do they still have their place? And should we actually discourage staff from going to these types of days and doing something longer term? And is the emphasis on research-informed teaching just a fad? So like my university colleague said, yeah, retrieval practice is very trendy, and perhaps it will go eventually the way of building learning power and other things, although I think there's still a place for some of those ideas. So I'm not sure if we want to take another small minute stop here and see if anyone wants to speak up or put any of their ideas into the chat box.
Andrew, actually, a couple of minutes ago, Louise Henderson actually posted a couple of points. Louise, can I invite you to unmute and speak and expand a little bit on what you've said?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we use Blue Sky as a package. I'm not sure if other schools and colleges use the same as well. And as part of our CPD process at the start of the year, we do get staff to look at teacher standards, but we also get all of our staff in the institution, including support staff, to look at the standards that are required for support roles as well, or for middle leaders and senior leaders, and we attach those so that staff really reflect on what the expectations of their role would be if they were to be measured to a counterpart nationally. And staff do it as a self-reflection. Some staff also may do a 360 and a coaching model to think about identifying gaps within their needs, and it provides a really good dialogue then to be able, for senior leaders to be able to bring that together and look at what the needs of the college are and to look at what our focus areas might be.
I think that's really important, because I think later on we come back to the idea of needs and whether staff should be as well using perhaps their CPD and performance management, and whether it should be directed as well. I'm not sure what your views on that are, but should we be directing staff towards certain type of CPD that would benefit the school, even if they have other perhaps requests in what they want to do? Which I think, I'm not sure your view on that.
I think it's a tricky one, really, because I think there are some staff that are very talented, but I think probably what you're going to be talking about as well today is about tapping into the talent as well, and utilising the quality that you've got in your institution in order to make sure that those who are the pioneers, who can lead others and take them in the direction that are the needs for the institution, can really pilot and take things on to close the gaps where the requirements are, to make sure that everything that the school needs can actually be fulfilled. Don't know if I made that very clear, sorry.
And it sounds like you're hinting at collaboration there as well. So teachers leading on CPD with other staff in the school, which would, with that question there, the idea of one-off training days, which I'm not rejecting, because we need to go on certain types of days all the time, be that health and safety or exam board. But I'm assuming you're saying that there's experts in the school, pioneers that can lead others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got an incredibly talented team of staff. We were set up as a free school college 5 years ago, and again, we invested heavily in our staff, and I think we've got great expertise. So we've got amazing staff with literacy skills who teach vocational subjects, and they demonstrate to some of our very academic subjects how students can write more effectively, and so on. So it's not always in the areas you would expect. But I think collaboration is the key. But you've got to have that willingness and that shared vision, and I think that's the really critical part. If everybody buys into the vision, then they understand the purpose of what you're all aiming to try and achieve.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. Has anybody else got any other questions on answers to these, or shall we move on? I think we'll move on then.
I was just going to add quickly that even though having a whole day professional event, that could be workshops, it could be that people choose things that are most appropriate and of interest to them, and that the idea of making it as personalised as possible is really important. Yeah.
I think really as well, I might have misworded that point down there, the traditional one-off training days where someone goes and leaves school to go on a course. Whereas I think there's still an important role for Inset, but it's how you build that Inset into the rest of the year. Is that the point you'd be making too?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we want this idea of research-informed CPD. So we do want to use these ideas from the people I've been talking about here, because I think a lot of them have got very good ideas, and we want to kind of embed what's coming out a lot of these organizations as well, which we'll kind of touch on a bit later. I do think there's an element though that we as schools need to take ideas perhaps that are being touted by inspirational consultants or perhaps academics, but just take them with a pinch of salt sometimes, but also trial them in our own areas, but also not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's things people have done before that might still work in certain contexts. So I think there's a mild danger there that sometimes you rush into ideas that are coming our way without really collaborating with staff on what they could be. So one thing we've done though for our school with CPD is to try and make a career development opportunities, if you like, spreadsheet. And I think I've shared that all with you. And it starts off with teachers who are either teaching assistants, unqualified teachers and NQTs in their first years of teaching. And it talks about what we can offer them. So if they are perhaps unqualified teachers, it will talk about getting them onto our professional development, professional studies, things on our weekly insets here. It will talk about how to get into initial teacher training, how to obviously join and access the most of the courses that our TSA offer during the NQT year. And then we then go on to years 3 and 4. And this is really where I think it's really important for us, because as we know from research, this is when we seem to lose most teachers in the UK, and they're less likely to stay in a profession. And it's also an area where it's quite hard to find things for people. So if there aren't those spaces in middle management yet for them, if they're aspiring and they want to progress very quickly and you don't want them to leave your school, what could you do CPD wise? And I think for us, this is where it's really important to have research-informed collaborative CPD. So we do a number of courses that are based on research. We work with something called Herts, which is a network of local schools that offer something called the Teacher Development Leadership Work Certificate, where teachers go off, look at research, trial things in their classrooms, come together and put those ideas out, and it's all certificated. We work with the University of Hertfordshire with their CAMSTAR research program, where teachers will go off and research something in their particular area. Then they will come back and share those results, obviously, with people in their school. But they write a 3,000-word report on that, and they get accreditation from the University of Cambridge, which is quite nice, and the opportunity to go to conferences. And we also work with our local schools as well on doing a number of different courses out there. And I think I shared the Herts and Bucks and Danes Educational Trust option forms with you, which shows all of the opportunities they have. But a lot of the courses we've looked at, where possible, are based on research, and they're also quite long term. And we think that's really important for our staff, that they can do something where they will get certification, but it will last a couple of terms, maybe a year on that one. And they are largely collaborative. So staff will come together with CAMSTAR, similar people in different schools. We've set up our own version now internally within the school called the Impactful Teacher program, which started off as a kind of a mentoring program for teachers that were underperforming. But we then stretched it out a bit like a lot of people have done with coaching programs. And we now use it at staff across the board who want to look at a certain area of their teaching, go off and research it with someone they've chosen within the school who's very good at that, and they put together a portfolio of ideas that they are then asked to share later on at Inset. So this is, again, where possible, our courses are based on research, and where possible, courses are long-term and sustainable, and we also want to make them collaborative, and they are relatively cheap. So the CAMSTAR certification, we found it costs a school £300 a year, and you can get as many staff members on that as possible. Or, of course, all of our internal programs are all put together by ourselves. And what's quite nice here as well is staff are given the opportunity to lead on these programs, particularly if they're in their 4th or 5th year of teaching, or maybe they're a middle leader with a certain area of expertise, and they get credit for doing that. I think that's quite good for their own CPD too, and I'm sure other schools are doing something very similar. So that's what we've tried to do. We try to look at how we can look at career development, how we can fit as much research-informed CPD in there, as well as other things such as obviously MPQMLs, which cost a bit more but are still research-based. We've recently discovered the National College of Education. So I'm not sure if other schools out there have come across them. They do either master's degrees or 12 to 18 months courses on, they do a Future Leaders course, which is a level 3 course for perhaps aspiring middle leaders, and an educational management program. And these are covered by the apprenticeship levy. So again, a very cheap way of covering our costs. We actually use the co-investment version of that, which is where we pay 5% of the course cost, and the rest is covered by DFE. And again, these are long-term projects which we can tie into staff's professional development and the school's SDP itself. So that's what we do there. We also have a leadership pathways program as well, which is quite interesting. It's open up to anyone. I'm sure a lot of schools do this, but it coincides with those other offerings. So last year we had an unqualified teacher who was working on raising literacy in the school. do the bronze pathway. Because she was doing a whole school program on literacy, she decided to use all the evidence she'd collated for that, and she'd done a CAM style project for that, and she basically put that forward for a bronze award within the school for kind of the first level of school leadership, and then we could celebrate that and certificate it on one of our Inset days when we're all together. So it's open to anyone. It's popular amongst younger teachers. We do have a few middle leaders interested, but we also have a leadership pathway for those who are aspiring to go into senior leadership. And it's also useful for support staff. So we've made it all open to them, and we're finding that there are a lot of support staff now, particularly who want to go into pastoral. And we can use this leadership pathways CPD to get them to do work that would support our pastoral needs in the school, but they can run whole school projects. They can do some research with particular groups of students. And again, someone last year did a silver leadership award on work with EAL students, so an established TA, but she took on a whole school program, also looking at phonics and bringing that in. So it's quite a nice way to reward staff and bring everything together. And all of these documents are shared with staff twice a year, not only when they do their PMRs with their line managers, the performance management reviews, but also something called a professional development plan that they do with myself and the head teacher, but I'll talk about that in a little while. So that's essentially what we do there. And I don't know if we just want to pause again for another minute to see what staff think, colleagues think of that, and whether people have got something similar in other schools. So maybe if we just give it a minute and people want to speak, please do so, or otherwise put something in the chat box. Have we got anything?
Yes, so Dave Nash has asked how much time or support is provided for the leadership pathways model.
Essentially, it would be a mentoring role on top of what they're already doing. But one of the things I wanted to do with this is we had something in my previous school that I thought worked very well, but people had to do not only mentoring with somebody above them in a leadership position in the school, but they had to go off to a number of prearranged courses on different Inset days and things like that. What I wanted to do with this model is essentially build it into the previous opportunities. So if staff were doing a number of things from this, they could then have a mentor and see how they implement that across the school in terms of leading on it. The mentor would obviously log that and talk to them and give them support, and then at the end of them, the mentor would write in a brief report, and the teacher would fill in a small Google document saying what they've done, what evidence they had, and that would essentially be it. So we wanted to make it very light and essentially use it as another incentive, but to get staff to use this document and actively look for things they could do to support them with this one. So some staff don't do that. A lot of staff, of course, are not forced to do it. They wouldn't want to necessarily engage with this, but those that did, it allowed them to therefore really think about what they wanted to select from that previous document and how far they could take it to get this additional award. So I hope that answers the question, but essentially not much time, and the mentoring on that was quite light. So it was largely up to the people being mentored, but it could be if they wanted to do it fortnightly, monthly, that was fine. But they were given essentially the academic year to gather that evidence. Okay, so if we move on then, one of the other things we've done in our school, because again, we want to use a lot of these courses staff are doing, whether it's part of the leadership pathways or in this other document, to supplement the school's teaching and learning and driving that forward in general. So we've created something within the school called the Reach Teach Toolkit. Not sure what you make of the name, but it's essentially a toolkit staff can use to improve their best practice, their pedagogy, but it's all based on research and it's all built into CPD. So some of the offers we give in that document we just saw build into this, and staff can use their qualifications from that to help with this. but all staff are involved generally. So what we have is a pedagogical ethos in the school based around Barak Rosenshine's principles of instruction. And I'm sure lots of people know what they are now. Obviously, they've been popularized by, what's his name? His name's escaped me now, Tom Sherrington. And we essentially looked at Rosenshine and narrowed down his kind of key points into 5 areas and 5 stages of learning. So the first one would be retrieval, which is obviously recalling prior learning, both recent and longer term, retrieval practice. Then we looked at hook, which is the engagement side of things. On this element, we borrowed from Doug Lemoff and Teach Like a Champion, the idea of this. It's good to have a 2-minute element in a lesson where you really engage your children, perhaps longer. Then we looked at knowledge, because one of the key things, particularly with the curriculum changes going back to 2014 and the changes in GCSEs that have resulted from them, is I'm sure we all agree, and it's probably the same at primary level too, there's a lot more knowledge required of pupils now in the curriculum, and therefore how do we teach that? So if we're going to deliver knowledge in the classroom, what are the best strategies for that? So here we've got ideas of dual coding, narratives and concrete examples. Then also, once you've taught knowledge, how do you apply it? So how do you get students to practice questions, to answer questions, to problem solve in maths? And again, the concepts here would be practice for fluency, deliberate or purposeful practice, and then of course review, particularly with Rosenstein talking about his daily and weekly reviews, checking for understanding and identifying areas for perhaps reteaching, and that could be done through questioning, assessment for learning, low stakes testing. So we put together this overview here, and that was what we wanted staff to look at and say, okay, if you create a lesson or a series of lessons, or even perhaps a sequence of lessons, a scheme of work, these are the ingredients we think would really impact and benefit teaching. So good retrieval, element of hook engagement, very good teaching of knowledge, getting the students to then apply that and then review that. And we shared this with staff, and it's got some key pieces of literature down there that are in our CPD library, but we wanted to take it further and make it part of continuing professional development. So our view here was that staff need to use this in their classroom, but use it in the context of their classroom, because they are the professional and they need that autonomy to have the skills to teach to the best of their ability. It was part of our commitment to evidence-based practice, although we now call that informed practice, because sometimes what does work somewhere doesn't necessarily work elsewhere, so it needs to inform us. Of course, the initial teacher training now has become more interested in standard free overall, so we wanted to make that an element of what we're delivering in the school and expectations from Ofsted on the curriculum, knowledge-based curriculums. We'd had a previous lesson study-based working way of doing working groups, where people would go off and look at, say, literacy or something, and go off and observe each other and come back, and that had been very successful. So we wanted to build on that with our Reach Teach toolkit, and also we'd been doing morning briefings on Teach Like a Champion, which had gone down well, so we wanted to build on that. And teachers really like practical tips during inset sessions. And we also acknowledge in our school that best practice and in our profession is based on plagiarism, essentially. If you see something that really works well elsewhere, adapt it, use it in your own context. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you look at a lot of the top books at the moment, I recently read Kate Jones's book on retrieval practice. It's a very good book, it's worth having, but I found a lot of the ideas she had were just other people's. I've seen them in this school, previous schools, and that's part of what makes us good teachers. So what we do with the toolkit then is we have Monday insets in our school. So the students go home early on a Monday and we have an inset session, and we will use at least 2 of those every half term to do the Reach Teach toolkit. So staff will be put into groups based on these areas. In those groups, they will look at, for the first part of the term, the literature and some other areas of interest, blogs and things, and what people are saying about it. Then they will come back during these inset sessions on a Monday and discuss it and decide what they're going to trial in their own classrooms. And they'll go off and trial it and then come back and discuss what's worked and what hasn't worked, share it with their initial working party, tweak it, go off and try it again. And the idea is that these groups will go off and it will be a years-long sustained element of practice in these areas and seeing what they can refine in their teaching. So again, we've got the kind of 6 points here. So it's to engage with research in their given area, one of those 5 areas, to identify best practice and techniques to trial, to develop plans and resources to trial with 1 or more teaching groups, to carry out a trial over an agreed period of time. So often the first year we did a year, then the year after we broke it down into a term and a half, to carry out that trial over an agreed period of time, to share those experiences with the group, identify the techniques and resources which work best, and then devise generic, and this is, we've got to be careful with the word generic because things are different in different subjects, but some generic resources that they can share with the whole school, but that can be adapted by any department. And therefore people can access that in what we call the toolkit. And what we also do with this is we have 2 inset days at the beginning of each term, and 1 morning is also devoted therefore to the Reach Teach toolkit. And we will go and select 5 ideas from the research we've been doing every inset, and those teachers will then teach what they've been doing on that day to all staff on a carousel. So not only do we have a document that has all these ideas in from the Reach Teach toolkit based on that ethos you saw at the beginning, but we then have that active element where people will come in and the staff will go off to a session where someone will exhibit some excellence in retrieval, then hook, then knowledge, application and review. It's gone down really well. So like all schools, I'm sure, are getting feedback on their inset, and this is clearly the most popular thing our staff have. They like being taught by each other. And again, that's what the document looks like, where we've got the files. And I think I did share this year's retrieval slides with you. So that would be in that file for this year. And during the summer, we put them together with everything else and do a number of things with that. Not only are they stored where teachers can access them on a staff handbook, which is a series of files open to everyone, but we, of course, we print them off and put them in the school CPD library. So what we will then do is get staff to come together at the end of every term and have a share fair based on this as well. And I'm sure all schools are doing this, so it's nothing that the Reach Free is doing that's unique. However, it is very cost effective. So we can use one of these insets. Staff can come together, they can show off what they're doing, they can learn from each other. And again, it's such a good way of doing that. We also as well, this is our Monday Inset program. So I've got the summer term here and the autumn term, and you can see if I point the cursor on there, obviously we have the toolkit introduced on the Inset day, one of the Inset days. Here we see we come back to it here. So groups will meet to discuss what they've done, where they're going with their research. They will come back here as well to perhaps refine that. Later on, they meet again to talk about where they've got to. And then those groups will then work in pairs, perhaps individually, and show off what they've done at the share fair. We've also done it, because it's popular with staff, we did it this term. So despite school closures and everything else, we had 2 days remote Inset at the beginning of the term, a number of things like this, but we did a lot of video recordings, and the Reach Teach toolkit was introduced through a live stream, and there was a kind of what we'd done, the 5 different videos we were sending out, and then we sent out the 5 videos that were staff kind of teaching the way they would have done if they're in the classroom. We also then came back at the end of the half term and did sharing of best practice for remote learning and how that fitted into the Reach Teach toolkit. So what would retrieval look like through remote learning, etc. And we carried it on through the rest of the summer term. And that's because staff wanted to carry on with it themselves, and it worked very well. So maybe if we just take another little minutes gap or so here to see what people think. This works for us. I don't know if it would work in your context. Going back to what we were saying earlier about the standards and collaboration and sustainability, it's so cheap to do this. But we did it in my old school, but what I think we do here is we do program it throughout the year. and it's become a real, if you like, foundation stone of everything we do. So maybe just a little discussion. How do you get staff to collaborate? Is it always easy? Maybe you got some questions for me. Do all staff do it equally? How does this fit into CP training and teachers' busy schedules? Because we are asking them to go off and do a bit of reading and research. And perhaps what are the limitations of this? Is there a danger in doing it? Perhaps we can, there are some common pitfalls and mistakes. So be good if anybody wants to say anything, please do so. And feel free to add comments in the chat box.
Okay, so something's come through from Michaela Francis. Linked to your questions, how do you enthuse staff to want to participate fully in these projects? Previous in-house CPD projects have sometimes been met with the additional workload resistance.
I think there's a number of ways of doing it. One is being wary of workload, but it's generally quite straightforward for us. Because we have these times where staff can come together, it shouldn't eat into a lot of the other things they're doing. So we wouldn't expect staff working on the retrieval strand, for example, to meet up any other time than what's been put into the Inset plan. The trialing in the classroom, I think, is quite straightforward. That's just a part of planning, and I think teachers can fit that in. And you can probably see from these slides down here, we do kind of make the end of term celebrations into more than just sharing the best practice as well. Obviously, there's food and things like that. The other thing is we try and embed it, and I'll come to this a little bit later on, in our PMR appraisal cycles. So there is that. As much as I'd like everything to be intrinsic, for me it's intrinsic, but there is an extrinsic reward as well for staff, that it will be built into their performance management. It's also built into our observation pro formas as well, which I'll come back to in a minute. And even going back here, I mean, if staff are doing, it's going to take me ages, don't know if this is a good idea actually, but going back to all of this, all of these courses, well, if staff want certification, a lot of that builds into the Reach Teach Toolkit sessions. So if staff were to choose an MPQML, if they were to choose a CAM style project, that certification is hopefully made easier in the end, because they can use the Reach Teach Toolkit sessions and collaboration as a vehicle for that. And then, of course, they can show it off, and senior management can see that. I think, again, this is why I mentioned the context of our school at the beginning, because we have been doing this for 4 years now. We were a very small school, a very young school in that sense. I think we've really embedded it, and people seem to appreciate what it does. And we do really big up staff's CPD on this. Are there any more questions on that, or shall we move on?
Just a thought. Oh no, we've got a little bit more that's just come through. Actually, Charlotte's just commented saying collaboration is strong within faculties and forms a central part of faculty meeting agendas, less strong across the school. Andrew says, we have 5 suggestions based around teaching. In my experience, staff have been willing to share their examples of best practice in short 15-minute CPD sessions, and that's worked very well.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, those short sessions. And when we put together the actual kind of documents and the toolkit, it's just a slide staff fill in with a couple of links. So when we ask them to research, we're not asking them to go off and read academic papers and things like that. It could be a number of blogs, it could be something they've heard of elsewhere. And then they fill in that form for other stuff. And occasionally all they do is they take a slide they've used with their kids and put that there for everyone else to see. So I think it could be relatively straightforward. And one of the key things here is telling staff how straightforward it is, but also as well senior leaders doing it. So again, I've worked in schools in the past where staff would do these working parties, but the SLT would be very aloof from it, wouldn't necessarily go to the sessions when they were demonstrated and didn't take part in the actual working groups, whereas we do that. And I think that's quite important. Even when we do on the Inset days, the staff showing off their lessons, the head will be going around with one of the groups. And I think maybe it's unique to our school, but staff quite like that, and they like to be able to perhaps show off a little bit, particularly to the head teacher, about what they can do. It gets them heard, if you like. So,
sorry, Andrew, just to we just had a question about a book that you mentioned at the start. Can you repeat the title of the book you suggested for the principles of teaching?
Yeah, it's Barak Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction, and it's now what Tom Sheraton is written a book on this, which I think, if you go on Twitter and things, a lot of people are talking about it. But that's a good book, but I don't quite understand why people just don't read the original Principles of Instruction. I think it's about 10 pages long. And Barak Rosenshine, he was an academic as a cognitive scientist, psychologist, and he went off and with a group of researchers looked at all the evidence for teaching and best practice, and he came up with a number of key things he thinks we should all do. And one of the key things was daily review, and I think that's the big thing with retrieval practice coming through on that one. And I think it is really worth looking at. And if anyone's interested, Nicola, what we could do afterwards is they're all available as PDFs on the internet, so I can get those and send them to you, and we can send them out because they come from the American Educator periodical, which is generally all free. Are there any other questions there?
No, that's it. Someone's provided a helpful link, and yes, yes, PDFs would be really helpful. Thanks, Andrew.
Excellent. Okay, so again, we find this works really well, and we've been doing it since we've been online. The other thing I think we're really lucky to have in the area I'm in is a very strong TSA and a good hub. We've been working with a couple of local schools, and what we do is through Challenge Partners, we do another research program that is all interlinked together. So a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, we did homework, and we had about 7 schools involved in that. From the Challenge Partners Hub, we opened it up to a few others in the local Teaching School Alliance, and we built it in with not the Hearts Cam, but the Cam Star certification. And we did a year-long project on homework because the Challenge Partner Hub head teachers said that was an area of concern. And it was on our CPD, for example. And it was really good working with staff in different schools. So they came together. It was a group initially of about 13. And over the year, it did whittle down to 8 of us. But people were quite keen to go off, really look at homework, look at how it was working in their context. And we created a website about that. It was in the test. We also took it to Challenge Partners. And we're currently putting a book together for Outreach on that project, and it was really quite deep. And then a year later, we did retrieval practice that worked very well with the hub. And I think I've actually got, I go here. So there's the website for the homework project there. And then we did retrieval practice. And this year we're looking at interleaving and some of our ideas from that project. Which is obviously interleaving is a big word, but everyone's using it. But the colleagues that have come together are looking at how you can do interleaving in different subject areas across the board. And we've already showcased some of that through the UK EdChat conference. So we are very, very lucky there with our local partners on doing that. But I'm just interested to know what people think about getting schools to collaborate, because again, I feel that we're quite lucky because the schools here are open to working with each other. They seem to be very happy to send staff off a little bit early at the end of the day to go to these meetings. We're also lucky again to be part of the CamStar network and the Hearts Cam network, which are very, very cheap and cost effective and allow for this long-term development that we not only share with our own staff, but other schools. And it's worth saying as well, because part of the title of this was cost effective. The research we do with our Challenge Partners Hub, unless we include photocopying and time, is very cost effective. And the core staff involved in that. So staff aren't directed to do it in the schools, it's optional. They do seem to do quite a lot of research. And then that creates resources you can share to others. And then the CPD leads in the schools involved can go back and feedback some of the ideas that came through that. So again, that's very cost effective. But I am interested to know if people want to put it in again the group chat or speak up. Have people experienced issues with collaboration between schools, and what other options perhaps are there for inter-school CPD? And also, should partnerships be limited, and can there be too much going on? Can that get just you've got staff going off left, right, and centre to all these different groups? So again, I'll be interested to know people's ideas if we briefly just see if anyone wants to speak or put in a question into the chat box.
Hi.
Hello.
We've done inter-school CPD, but we've done it mainly with things like moderation. But
Yeah.
I would be quite interested in doing like a research-based CPD, which we haven't been involved in. But we've done moderation where we just look at each other's books and learn from each other and just talk about the evidence that we can see and what needs to be done, what are the next steps, and then we come back and look at books again at another time.
I think first of all, it's really good that people do that too, because when we're talking about exam marking and things like that, I'm sure we'll do the exam things, but coming back regularly to that moderation and having groups you can rely on. I see that part as sustainable, cheap, because it's just staff come together, CPD, and we put that through the Challenge Partners Hub. I don't know if that's where you're doing that, but with the research program, and initially the ideas come from the head teachers at the hub. Although, if I'm honest, they're quite willing to go with the trends that are coming out. But we advertise it through the hub, so we'll get the admin based at a school near us, St Clement Danes, to send out flyers that will get within those schools sent out to staff. We do a twilight in September, and people come together where we introduce the kind of topic area. I often, as part of my role in my school, will go off over the summer and do a bit of background reading, come up with some of the key ideas, and we then have a discussion about it. And then staff will go off, and then they will come back at the beginning of the spring term with what they've come up with and what they're going to implement over the spring and summer terms within their areas. Then they go off and trial those within their own schools. They come back towards the end of the summer term, and then we kind of collate it, share ideas, kind of do a small teach meet within the research group, share all that research so people can take it back to their own schools and use it if they see fit in Inset, and then present back to the head teachers at the hub meeting. But we found using Challenge Partners is quite good, because I think the initial thing is if you send something randomly out to different schools, it ends up in someone's inbox. They get a lot of those things, they forget about it. Even if what you're offering is quite good, it gets bogged down with all the other quite good stuff out there. And I think the nice thing with Challenge Partners is that the heads hear about it. So if it, for them, rings any bells and they're interested in it, they can go back and talk to their CPD leads. And also we meet obviously every half term, so we refer back to it, and it keeps up that kind of tempo of keeping a buzz around it. And I think the other thing we do is when we do the other sessions, we say that anyone else can come along if they're interested. So occasionally in the spring and summer terms, people will turn up to these sessions who weren't involved in the original ones because they've just heard about it or they've become curious. I think it really helps as well. I don't know about your school, whether you're working within a number of different groups within the school, but what's quite nice is the Herts and Bucks Teaching School Alliance and the Challenge Partners. It does involve some schools that are in one, but not in the other. But we've kind of broken down the barrier there. So we kind of spearhead it through Challenge Partners, then open it out through the TSA. And also because some of the staff involved in it are doing their own projects for HeartsCam or CamStar, they also invite colleagues from those networks so we can get more people involved.
My school is not in Hertfordshire or Bucks. My school is in Harrow, but I would be interested.
Yeah, so maybe that's something you can do, and maybe speak to are you a hub manager or?
No, I'm not. I'm part of Compass Hub.
Yeah, so it might be worth speaking to
the hub manager
and seeing if you could put that. So every year we have it on our hub agenda, a research project, and that's become the staple of the last 3 years and fourth going forward.
Okay.
That would be worth doing. I think it's also just seeing what's already out there and what you can access. But I am wary here because I think it does depend on the alliances and things you work with and how willing they are. Okay. Any other questions?
Nothing's come through on the chat, Andrew.
No worries. Okay, so again, I think it's also, you can develop into-school research even further. So we do this research, we share it with challenge partners, we share it with the Herts and Bucks TSA. We've also got, if you like, a rival alliance where we're based in Watford, but they invited us to come and deliver the homework project and the retrieval practice ones to them. So we got the name out there, not only of challenge partners, but our schools. We've also done literacy projects as well, and oracy projects within our TSA. And I think it's important to feed this where it will go. So we take it even further. We've now delivered some of the research projects now as initial teacher training sessions with the TSA we're associated with. We use it for NQT sessions, not only within our school, but in a kind of joint TSA NQT provision. We also as well have shared our ideas and PowerPoints with the University of Hertfordshire, which they were very appreciative of during lockdown because they could put out more lectures using our research on that one. We also put it through things like UK Ed Chat. That's quite good for reblogging. Challenge partners, of course, Twitter and LinkedIn. So social media is quite good here because we write quite a lot of blogs in our school and we also put them on the TSA blog, and we find once you put it onto LinkedIn it goes up into hundreds of people looking at it, which is really, really good on that one. And I think often we get people contact us from all manner of places because they've read a blog that we've put out there on an element of CPD or research. We had one of our teachers a couple of years ago do some work on it was actually with Impact Head, which do work with challenge partners on whether teacher-led retrieval practice is better than pupil-led. And although it was only a small blog, we got a couple of requests from people in other countries to speak to them and get a bit more information to them. So that's really good. And I'll give you an example from the Reach Teach toolkit. When we developed it for remote learning, we put it out as a blog, and we got requests to translate the blog on the advice of like doing retrieval and teaching knowledge remotely. Somebody wanted to translate it into French, so now it's in French. And we also had a university in Colombia, of all places, they put it into Spanish, and that was quite nice because they were talking to us and sharing ideas, and we now got this link with a university in Colombia. Maybe when things are safer out there in terms of what's currently going on, I can try and do a trip. But I think there's lots of ways you can do inter-school stuff. So you use the organisations you already work with, but also think about using social media to get those ideas out there and see what comes back your way and what opportunities. I'd like to just point this out as well. Someone mentioned earlier getting staff to do things, getting staff involved in research-informed CPD and CPD in general. One of the things we do in our school, and I sent you 2 examples, and it would be quite good if you got those examples to hand, is we do something called a 5-year development plan or professional development plan. Every year, each staff member within our school meets with myself and the head teacher for 15 minutes to talk about their 5-year plan. And this is essentially what CPD they need over the next 5 years to get to where they would like to be in 5 years' time. I hadn't witnessed this in my previous schools, and I thought it was wonderful that our head is giving 15 minutes to every staff member to talk about what they want, and then allow me to come in with suggestions for the CPD. And it's quite good because, again, it allows me to point out things like CamStar and HeartsCam and all of this research-based stuff we do, as well as the more kind of traditional things like someone might be starting teaching psychology A level, and they want to do those traditional courses where they go off and learn a bit about that. And on this one, I mean, all staff do this. They meet with me and the head teacher. It maps out their CPD, talks about their career aspirations. It ties into their PMR, and we'll go back to it every year. But you can see this is my own from 2018, and on that one, that the head teacher put me down for the National Professional Qualification for Senior Leadership, the co-hub manager for Challenge Partners, which was something we'd muted, and then refined it and improved the teachers in training CPD program, which is an in-house thing, fellowship with Chartered College, and then Ofsted inspector training in 5 years' time if that's something I still want to do. But I think this is quite good because it allows us to map out CPD. It allows staff to properly think about it, and they know that I'll have another meeting next year to evaluate it. But it also allows us to get a sense of where they want to go. And I see it partly as intrinsically important to what we do in improving pupil outcomes and getting the best training for our staff. But I also have an extrinsic view on it, and that it's very good for retention. Again, particularly those teachers who are perhaps second, third, fourth year into teaching, not sure what they want to do. We've got a number of teachers that we're quite keen to keep hold of. So by having these, I did one yesterday with a colleague of mine. She's just finished her NQT year, a subject lead for an A-level subject, and she feels she'd like to be a subject leader. We don't quite think being, if you like, NQT +1, she's ready for that. But next year, if she fulfills her PMR and things, we could put that down on this. So she knows where she's going with it. So they're really worthwhile doing. And they also help staff when it comes to their PMR later on, because they can refer back to it. Their line managers can ask to see a copy and refer back to it. And it's all set there. And it also allows them to hold us to account for their CPD too. And I think it's also quite important then that schools put CPD into their performance management. And this is easy for me to say again because we do it. And if schools don't do it, it might be quite difficult. But this is an example of our PMR proformas. I know schools do it in different ways. Like probably all schools, all teachers will map themselves out against the teacher standards. If they're assistant teachers, they'll do the assistant teacher standards, etc. And that will be looked at throughout the year. But then we also have the 3 main targets with, of course, people that will either not meet them, meet and exceed. And one of the things here is that, like I'm sure all of your schools, that top one is the dreaded target. You know, how many kids you got to get Progress 8 or on ALPS. But this second one is their CPD one. So they must choose an area of CPD to do for that year. And we do prefer it to be something related to either the department action plan or the school development plan, because this will be agreed with their line manager. And the caveat to this is it needs to be sustained and collaborative within the department. And that's where we get a lot of staff involved in this. So they know, but joining in those working groups, if they have got something in this target, they will engage with those working groups because they obviously want to reach their targets when the PMR comes up for review the year later. And of course, the more they do, the closer they get to exceeding it. And we've had teachers now not only engage in it, but they go off and they might do training sessions. They'll volunteer perhaps to do training sessions with the TSA, with initial teacher trainers to do that a little bit more. They might want to write a blog, for example, to prove they're doing that little bit more. And I feel that this is quite good. We're getting quite a lot of out of people. And it's not to look at it cynically, but I think that improves them and their practice on that one. So that's what we do there. It's working very well. And we do ask when people have line management meetings that the CPD target is on the minutes. So we don't lose the idea that this is cyclical and part of an appraisal is part of a cycle. And it goes back to, I think, David Weston, the guy who put together the DFE standard for teachers' professional development. He wrote a book called Unleashing Great Teaching. And one of the things he says in there is that where CPD fails is that it's not in appraisal, but only is it not only in appraisal, but no one ever goes back to it throughout the year. So there's even a danger with a PMR is that you stick something down on a PMR, someone goes off, forgets about it with all the crazy things going on during the school year. They might look at it midway through the year, worry about it, not worry about it, and then they look at it again when it comes round. But by having a continual discussion about that, discussion about how their CP is going, how it's impacting things, is central to leading on CPD and making sure it's ever present in what they do and getting the most out of it. So again, we do that, and we do this for all staff. It includes leadership, teaching staff, support staff, admin staff. And if there's one area we need to improve in this school is building in admin CPD. But with the PDPs, or the professional development plans, that you should have had sent to you as a PDF, one of them is for a member of our admin team. So we very much think about their CPD too. The other thing we have is all staff are observed by their line manager for appraisal twice a term. So again, I'm not sure how schools are doing it now, and I'm sure most schools, if not all, have dropped the idea of grading staff 1 to 4. But what we do is we've built in our Reach Teach toolkit and another couple of key areas of practice into this table. And staff are observed for 20 minutes twice every term, and they basically, a staff member will go in and observe a lesson, and they'll have a Google form, and they'll fill out 3 areas of strength that they see in that lesson, and 1 to 3 areas of weakness or next step. So we wouldn't call it weakness, it's areas for consideration. They also do qualitative type up a few things in that as well. That Google form will then be released by that teacher when they're ready for the teacher to look at, and they can have a discussion on that observation. But what we've done is we've tied that into the Reach Teach toolkit. So elements of retrieval, hook, knowledge, application and review are there alongside other elements of our professionalism. And what's quite good though is that these forms then give us an overview of where we are as a school. So if a subject area, which it can also be broken down to, is in green, we're getting a lot of kind of strengths in that area. If things are in red, it's the perceived next steps area. And that's really useful for us on SLT in planning where we're going to go next with our kind of Reach Teach toolkit and the direction of travel with that. And also in helping staff and looking at departments on that one. So it's a very useful diagnostic tool, not only between the observer and the observed, but as an overall analysis tool for us with teaching and learning in school on that one. And again, it is based on evidence-informed pedagogy, but we do include other key areas there, and it can allow that evaluation. And that, in a way, builds into our cycles. And what we have here then is each term, obviously roughly 12 to 14 weeks, we have this kind of posted in all the offices and in the staff room around the school, and it will kind of say what should happen on different weeks. So those appraisal observations will be included. So learning walks will take place then. We've got one there, for example, on that half term, and staff know when they're coming up. It will also include the kind of feedback sessions, so staff know when they're due to have that appraisal and feedback on their CPD. This is an older version, but it also now includes obviously the Reach Teach toolkit, meeting sessions, and when we're having them. So again, that's very nice to keep everything together. The other thing we encourage staff to do is peer observations too. So again, we are wary of time, so we don't hold teachers to account on this if they can't manage to do the peer observations. But we like to encourage them to do at least 2 peer observations every half term, which are built into these cycles too. They would largely be to do with their Reach Teach toolkit groups. They would go in, a staff member would ask them perhaps to go in and look what they're doing with perhaps how they're doing concrete examples in history, or it could be how they're using narratives in science. They could be, how they're using pop culture even as a hook in maths. And the teacher will go in, again, 15 to 20 minutes, and then meet up with them and discuss it and learn from them, and also give them some feedback. It's more of a coaching thing as well. So this isn't done hierarchically. It's done across the board on that one. Occasionally staff don't do the 2 per every half term because of obviously other workload and things, but staff do tend to do it. They seem to enjoy it, and that works quite well for us. And it goes back to years ago when we did lesson study, which I'm sure a lot of schools have done. The only thing I wanted to do with lesson study, though, is with the addition of the Reach Teach toolkit, was pull out all of the paperwork with that and make it more fluid. So staff have plenty of time to be seen on that. So essentially, that's how we've brought up our CPD. We've based it on the standards. We've created that opportunities framework where people at all stages of their career can access what we like to think of as good quality CPD provision. That's built into our pedagogical ethos with the Reach Teach toolkit. There's a lot of collaboration there, sharing there. In turn, that is built into the Challenge Partners Hub and the TSA, and we're lucky with our partners there that there's lots of sharing and reciprocation. And then we build it into our appraisal systems, as you can see with that, and looking at how staff are performing. So again, what we'll do almost at the end, feel free to ask any questions now. I hope it's been useful. Again, it would have been different if we were together. We could have asked more questions, shared more, but feel free to ask any questions now at the end.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Thank you very much. It was absolutely fascinating. Thank you. We do quite a lot of research in our school as well, but I've always guided the staff around the research. So last year we did research on active engagement. Do you guide your staff onto the types of research, you know, until they get, or is it they come up with a research idea?
Yeah, we do guide them, and it's informed. And it's interesting when I say research informed, I think, and I hope people understood why I put all of those kind of Twitter superstars up earlier. They're the big names everyone mentions, but I think we need to be informed by ourselves. And one of the things we do is we created the toolkit as an area to guide people in. And there is a lot of scope within those areas for them to branch out and research kind of perhaps quite unique ideas in there. But where we're really informed is with this document here, and of course, Ofsted reports and our Challenge Partners report. So last year, a couple of years ago, we did a lot of work around feedback. And we did a big trial on that and came back with whole class feedback, which I'm sure a lot of people did. And our recent Challenge Partners review said, it sounds great what you do, but they hadn't seen many people doing it in the classroom. So next year with the Reach Teach toolkit, that area of review, which would include feedback, we are asking the people looking at that to focus on how we can improve what we've already got in place. That will be shared with them. They'll know that's come from our own observations. And it's similar. This year we had a big push on retrieval and review and using question and answering, because the year before that came up in our Ofsted, which was very good, but question and answering, disappointingly for me, because I thought it was generally quite good across the school, but they found some anomalies in that, as did the Challenge Partners QA, and therefore we put a big emphasis on that this year too. And I think that's helped us kind of plug those gaps. Someone mentioned earlier as well, they didn't quite use the word benchmarking, but that allows us next year when we have our QA again, not so much worried about Ofsted at the moment because I think they're some way off, but we can say that we have that on this. We've used this documentation and then we've implemented it through these research groups. I'm not sure if that's useful.
No, it is. Thank you very much. Can I ask another question? Have you done research with your support staff? I work in a special school, so we are very top heavy with support staff. So we may have one class teacher and 3 to 4 LSAs per class. When I've done the research, I've done different research for teachers and different research for my learning support assistants. Have you done something like that, or is it always similar?
We used to. I'm trying. Is it NESDEN? Are they the organisation that does for a number of our support staff qualifications? But they wanted to join in with the toolkit things because they're often involved. Now, I would say teaching assistants, we call them assistant teachers here, and some of them as well, like our year 7 assistant teachers, take some lessons occasionally, and we very much want them to feel part of that body of pedagogy in the school, that's working on that. So we actually get them to come along and engage with the toolkit. They've done some research. We've had quite a lot of good Herts projects. We've had a couple this year, and also CAM-style projects through that. And we have had, with the delivery on the Inset days where teachers teach each other, we have had a number of support staff actually do that teaching too, on areas of their expertise. So I would encourage them to be part of the whole school, where that's, I mean, that they will have their own bespoke stuff to do, which again, there's a time constraint. But I think it's important that they're empowered to feel that they are part of that driving force of teaching and learning in the school. That's exactly what they're doing, just on maybe a smaller scale within the room.
Yeah,
and
no,
they
no, because I made absolutely sure they were part of that research cycle.
Yeah.
I designed a specific, research project for them, which was part of UCL, university, and certs and so on.
So what we would do is that they'd often as well maybe adapt how, if you were a teaching assistant, for example, with EAL, how would you perhaps look at some of the strategies being used in those working groups with your EAL students? And I think that's how we've used it going forward. But it is worth me saying as well that this isn't the be all and end all for our CPD. If there are any people want to ask me anything, feel free to email and later at a later time, and I'm more than happy to answer. And then I think, again, thank you for joining. And shall I pass over to yourself, Nicola, now?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. So there haven't been any other questions that have come through. We've got someone saying thank you for sharing all of this. They really like the cohesive approach you've brought to CPD and the learning walk tracker. And actually on the learning walk tracker, someone asked if that could be shared. I don't think that was, but perhaps if it could be shared in a template format, would that be possible? I
could do it. Well, I've got to be careful because anything I share with that is going to have loads of details of colleagues' performance. I can probably share the master because it's strangely it's all coded for the quantitative side, so I could share the master for that. I could share the kind of overview spreadsheet, and I could probably get a copy of the Google Forms if people use that we use when we go around. And the Google form is so easy to use on that.
Thanks, Andrew. No, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew, for the time you've taken to put this webinar together and for sharing all of the resources as well. That was really interesting and insightful, and I really hope that delegates can take that. There's lots of takeaways there, and thinking in how to implement it in their own settings. So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining us today. So what I will be doing following this is sending through, I think I'll reshare the resources so you've got them all again, so you don't have to go through emails. I'll also share with you the slides from today and a feedback form as well. Your feedback is really valuable and it does help shape our future sessions, so please do take the time to complete that. And also we have been recording this, so we will be hosting it on our website. It will be in the events section, and if you also go to that section, you'll be able to see videos of former sessions such as this. It's really great if you wanted to share it with colleagues, so please do that. I don't have anything more to say. I'm just going to go back to the chat. Andrew, I can see you can probably see the chat now, so you can see there's some thank you.
Yeah, if I could just say as well, everyone, it's a bit strange because I've been talking to a PowerPoint for the last hour and a half. So yeah, no. And again, if anyone's got any questions, you feel free to ask now. I guess if there's less people, you might be more comfortable talking.
And I'll also share Andrew's contact details as well, which Andrew's kindly offered, so you can email Andrew afterwards.
And if you've got any ideas as well, because I don't think what we've done is the finished product. It evolves all the time. I wouldn't say it's perfect, and we've got a lot to learn from other schools. So any ideas as well, please share. Someone's put the Barrett Rosenshine PDF there. If you get a chance, the other one to look at is Strengthening the Student Toolbox by John. See if I can get that. I'll put another document on the chat if anyone's interested in this. This is another example of a, again, it's an academic, and I think we need to be wary of academics and cognitive scientists because they aren't teachers. And again, we always need to look at what's going on in our own contexts. And there are ideas that they sometimes rubbish, but you might have been doing for years and think, hang on, group work might not be advocated anymore, but there are certain things with group work that work really well. But it's called Strengthening the Student Toolbox, Study Strategies to Boost Learning, by John Dunlosky. And he and his colleagues came up with, or looked at 10 strategies, everything from practice testing to elaboration, to rereading, to summarization, and using imagery, and essentially looked at what was the most effective. And that's quite an easy read and quite informative too.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
No worries.
I can send that in the follow-up email as well. And if you've got any, I think you were going to send some PDFs to me as well. Yeah, if there's anything else to send to me, and I can send on to delegates.
No worries.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. I don't think we've got any more questions coming through. So shall we call it a day?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day, everyone.